Day 4. This is where we do a PowerPoint presentation and we show where are we with the design. You know, we are showing, okay, during these 3 days we designed this. We hear that the residents and business owners would like to see more of this type of landscaping, more of this type of aesthetic. So that's the day that, you know, staff has been working really hard for 3 days and we are ready to present that day. That day 4 is like our first preliminary draft, you know, and it's very important because we are going to be asking, did we hear you? Did we listen to you? Is this what you are thinking about? And again, we will show block by block what are the different alternatives that we will be proposing. For example, are we thinking about green roofs? Are we thinking to put the facade more toward the corridor? Are in public places. This is something that we have not addressed that until now, but many communities around Florida, they are actually asking to the developer who is building an office building or a plaza or anything, X amount, a percentage they can put toward art. And that's actually is a great contribution toward the aesthetics of the city or of the village in this case. We just call it, it's a program, it's art in public places, and it's very widely used. So, post-charrette, once we are done with those 4 intensive days of the charrette, there will be a point where we'll go back, all the professionals, to the studio, and then we will have follow-up workshops where we will present the vision, alternatives, and recommendations of the master plan to the Village Council, Planning and Zoning Board, Steering Committee. So it's a follow-up workshop. Once we do all those workshops, then we'll prepare the draft master plan. So, and the draft master plan will have a number of 3D renderings, recommendations, site plans, architectural elevations based on that intensive process. Landscaping plans, sidewalks, zoning recommendations. For example, when this section was actually put together thinking about the US 1 corridor, we are thinking about the human scale, we are thinking about the buildings being closer to the corridor. For example, these are typical street sections. We will consider what is better, 3 floors, 4 floors, 5 floors, how does it work, you know? So these are different type of conceptual renderings. In this case, we might be, based on all the input, proposing that the parking area would be more on the rear of the property rather than in the front, and bring the buildings closer to the corridor, like in this 3D rendering. We'll propose alternative layouts. And then task 9 will be a draft plan will be provided to the steering committee, village staff for review and input. Then a final master plan will be prepared based on all those input. And then finally, it will be a presentation to the council and to the community for adoption of the master plan. So, questions?
Any thoughts?
I'm just pretty amazed at all the work that you put into this. That was very impressive. You did a great job.
Thank you.
I would second that.
I will say I think this is probably one of the most important things that the village should do moving forward. I feel like the village of DeQuesta has there's just different sections that have all kind of come together to create this wonderful place, but that we kind of, to go forward, need to have a clear vision. And I would ask that this is done in regards to protecting what we have. more than creating something big. And I think that's where the focus should be more of, okay, we are a very small town community, and it's something that I think is very desirable. And that's where I want the focus of this charrette to go towards, is having a vision of keeping it the way it is, but doing it in a way that makes it pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, I guess. And so I think we should move forward. I think that maybe, and I like your presentation, I see the cost of it. I don't know if that's reasonable. I imagine it is, but I would say, ask the staff if we can afford something like this budget or next. I don't know if it can be done this budget. He's looking at me, but I do think we should at least look at trying to accomplish something like this, but maybe putting it out to bid for a variety of different people to come in and just hear how that process would be done, and then select someone to moderate the process of a charrette. To me, I think we should absolutely continue to talk about trying to create some type of cohesiveness to the scattered of how Tequesta has been developed over the years. So that's mine.
Molly?
I think, Nelson, you commented on this. I personally think it should expand from US 1 quarter. I think we need to look at the bigger, the bigger picture, and maybe some of the other commercial corridors like Cypress, is a good one. And then how many of these has your company done, and are you able to tell us where, like what cities?
Yes, we have done something in those renderings. Let me show you. You saw these 3D rendering. We have done that for the city of Lake Worth Beach. Those were city of Lake Worth Beach. I have also worked for Deerfield Beach. Years ago, we did a charrette for a shopping plaza in that case. And this is actually was done for US 1. Sarah did this. Great job, Sarah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's like 4 sections, like Tequesta Drive, Cypress, Old Dixie, and US 1 would be areas that we would want to be a part of.
Yeah, because if we're going on this road, you might as well accomplish all, and like you said, with the connectivity and how we want it to look. When it comes to the charrette, what do you feel is the minimum amount of public participation that would render this effective?
The minimum amount of days?
From public participation.
Well, I was proposing 4 days,
Not the time frame, but like how many people, how many residents, how many business?
The more the better. The more the better. That's the reason for me is critical, the advertising, and more the 2 months minimum. You cannot create a buzz with 3 weeks in advance, no, because it has to be cross-referenced. We need to go, this is the way I envision. First of all, I would like to put together a list of all the HOAs. When do they meet? And go there and invite them personally in those meetings to the HOA residents. They need to be able to hear it through direct invitation, also through social media. It has to be cross-referenced. In some communities, they even put a little like on the street or something, charrette is coming. Well, we have here a great signage, So it has to be cross-referenced, or otherwise it's always the same thing. I never knew, didn't hear about it, how did you do this? So we need to really have time to advertise.
Yeah, that would be important to me, because there's got to be a threshold. I don't know what that is. That's why I was asking that participation.
I've been in
from the public,
charrettes, for example, where
we
we have in each table 8 to 10 people, and we had charrettes, with 10 tables, So actually the photo that I showed where everybody's sitting, that was a pretty large charrette in Deerfield Beach, so years ago, and we had a big attendance.
And then, so you did touch on the time frame. I've done charrettes like this. I feel like 4 days might be a little tight. I don't know if that should be expanded on, and if that would affect the cost of your proposal. 'Cause if we do have a lot of public participation, I feel like 4 days might be a little tight to get that done. So is there any flexibility within the time frame in your proposal?
We can add days, definitely, especially, well, because like I said, it was one, but if we're gonna add Cypress or we're gonna add this, then we have to kind of change the methodology. Charrette is a method. It's a method to raise consensus and to listen what the community wants. So once we change the scope, we have to adjust the methodology. You know, it's possible 5 days, you know, very possible.
And then when it comes to the landscape architects, urban designers, planners, how do they get selected?
I select them. They are part of my team that I work with them. You know, they are my sub-consultants, basically. You know, the landscape architect, I trust them. They are part of my team, and I know they will do a great job. Otherwise, they will not be part of the team.
Okay. I think that's it. I'm just going through.
What do you think a percentage would be a good percentage? Like feedback from surveys and things, if there's 6,000 people, we got 1,000 people that participate.
I need to think about that. I think
the larger the better.
for sure,
Yes.
the larger the better. I mean, I don't know what the final result. Do we know what the final results of how many people participated with the last survey that closed today? I think today was last day. So I mean, like last time you sent it was like 200 something people. I'm like, to me, that's definitely not enough.
No.
I wouldn't even judge it by that survey, only because that survey was kind of a yearly generic
Right.
survey. I mean, we did a survey for the community center, and those were different numbers.
You got a good turnout for that, so.
Yeah, those are significantly different.
Yeah.
And again, we had we did the HOAs, we had multiple public meetings.
The church.
And the input is not just coming, obviously, through the charrettes. You are inviting people to come in and participate in that process. But
Right.
the communication process is going on, has been described over an extended period of time. And people have a chance to come in and out. People have a chance to see what we publish, put on the website. People have a chance to then, vote their preferences as we go along. So, yeah, I think the goal would be to have as many individuals who want to be actively participating in the process, to give them every opportunity to do so. Lori,
Thank you for a very well-organized presentation. You did do a very well job, thank you. One of my questions ties into Mrs. Young's question. When you've done the charrette before, what was your turnout?
Like I said, one of the largest one was the one in Deerfield Beach where, let me just show this.
I mean, I obviously know
Yes.
that city is different from ours.
Yes, so you see there the tables? We had a number of tables. I think there were like eight to 10 tables, and there was a lot of participation, but we took our time to advertise too, So advertising is everything, as always. And so I basically around 100 people. That will be my maximum that I have attended, So 100 people, that's that's a large number. And I was thinking we're gonna need to think about the venue. Usually they are, I don't think that this place will be large enough for that. Usually they are hosted that was, for example, in a banquet hall. That was part of the shopping plaza where the charrette took place. So many times are also on recreation centers, Another times in a hotel venue, like a conference rooms. For example, when I forgot more cities. The city of Palm Beach Gardens, we did a charrette also, and it was, actually we did it at the Marriott, at the conference center. And the day one, usually it's very, very important. Day one, we did it on a Saturday, so for people to come, to be able to attend the meeting. That was on a Saturday, and we even had a table for children so they can also do their visioning. And then another charrette that also happened is, that was more like a workshop, like I said. It was the city of Westlake, which is the new city in Palm Beach County. My company also oversees planning for that new city. It was incorporated in 2016. It's close to Royal Palm Beaches, west. So anyway, yeah, but it's very interesting. I'm a big fan of charrettes.
Yes, I think this is very, very, very important, because yes, we are almost fully developed out, but redevelopment is really important to me personally. My biggest concern is cost. I don't know what year we would even put this in, and it's nothing against you. You were amazing. You've done so much great stuff with the village, but would it not be wise for us to have another bid on a charrette like this, just so, and it's kind of coming from me too, because I have nothing to compare it to. I've never personally actually done a charrette, so I want to make sure that we are setting up ourselves for success as well. I know you're going to be busy with other things coming through the village at the same time, so I'll make sure we are doing a good job if we were to spend money on it. So that would be my biggest question. I absolutely want to do it, whether it's next year, the next year. I definitely think the village needs to do it. I just don't know when, and I'd like to maybe see a comparison cost.
I would see comparison costs and other ideas too.
Yeah.
On the concept too.
One thing I was gonna ask you, what do you think the additional peripheral cost would be in addition to your fee? From your past experience in these other cities that you've done this for, you got your comprehensive plan amendments, zoning code changes, and final design and construction drawings are not part of the subject scope of the service and fee. So do you have an idea percentage-wise of that it would cost above and beyond your fee to draft up all these other peripheral costs?
That's a great question. You know, it's very unpredictable, because once we are done with the master plan, there will be a number of recommendations, and cities, they choose to do it, you know, some cities, they do it all together, or they will decide, well, this year we're gonna do comprehensive plan amendments, next year we'll do just the zoning amendments, so they can break it down. I couldn't give you a number. I could not give you a specific number, because it's, again, depend on their budget, how they wanna approach, you know, the implementation itself. And there might be, you know, capital improvement, drainage, you know. For example, I don't know if you saw this, I took,
The way you're looking for that, you know, you obviously have a certain amount of time calculated into this cost,
Oh,
because
yes.
everything's based off of time. And so the amount of time that you have, I'd be curious as to what your cost per hour for your different people that work in your organization, you know, for, you know, the additional fees and stuff that we would be looking at, and what their hourly rate would be to draft up different drawings, et cetera, and stuff for the peripheral stuff that we would have to have.
in addition to what is proposed.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is, you know, when someone asked earlier about, you know, if it took additional days, I believe that Molly was talking about that. You know, if there's gonna be additional days, there's gonna be additional cost. I mean, you're not gonna.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, that's where I'm going with this, is, you know, what's gonna be your fee, you know, for an hourly fee, and who do you get for what fee and stuff, you know, like when you hire an attorney, and, you know, we do that, you know, what the legal assistant would be, what the attorney is.
I can provide you that.
Yeah.
It's a breakdown, you know, I can definitely provide you that. This was just, this fee was exactly for this number of days and this scope, but I can do a follow-up and provide you that, provide you too. Jeremy, for example, look at this, I took this photo, this is Salt Lake City, just walking around the downtown, and they have actually like a stream going parallel to the sidewalk. That was really, I would say, a very inviting experience to be walking around the sidewalk and just seeing the water, this, you know, going through, you know, parallel to that. So that is downtown Salt Lake City.
I'd like just to comment on a couple of thoughts. Kyle, you mentioned protect what we have. Some of what we have, I just as soon see go away, to be honest with you. But I think some of the buildings along US 1 that aren't particularly attractive or appealing, but I think what we've tried to say in the past is we want to protect the ambiance and the feel of the village. That's really, I think, what our objective has been. I want this process to be one that is somewhat creative, that brings new ideas to the forefront. I don't think we should be locking ourselves into the past. I think we should be looking forward to the future. I think the other thing is when we talk about going forward with this, it'd be great to address all 4 sections. But again, redevelopment's coming. It's going to happen. So you've got to think about the timing here. So if we can do the US 1 corridor, that can be the foundation then for what we might, use as a basis for the other areas. What I don't want to see us get into is a situation where we're doing this 2-3 years down the road. Things will be happening well in advance of that. So I think again, I've said this before, government has a tendency to drag its feet. The private sector has a tendency not to. I think we need to try and keep pace with the private sector, keep pace with what's happening in the economy, what's happening all around us. So I think we need to find this money, if it's not in this year's budget, which I know may be difficult. And I don't know, we're going to talk about the CARE Act later, but I do think at the very least it should be in next year's budget. That would allow for some planning to take place ahead of time, so that once we start this process, we can move through it in an effective and an efficient manner, publicize it, get the kind of input we're talking about. Nilsa's saying we need a couple of months of input. Well, that takes us through June and July. Now we're closing in on next year's budget. So I think those things are real important. The other thing is we all got the grant list that was compiled that Jeremy sent out. And there's numerous grants of all sorts of types that are on that list. And the state right now, again, they just finished the budget process, but there's going to be a lot of funding available because of the infusion of federal dollars. And in order to capture that, in order to have a real shot at those, we've got to be prepared. We've got to be prepared to move quickly when those grant opportunities arise. I think the next budget cycle, there's going to be dollars available. And I'd want us to be in a position to be able to compete for every single dollar that we can and bring in as many dollars as we can to help underwrite or fund any of the initiatives or projects, that we think are appropriate. So I think it's very, very important we move forward with it. I think focusing, like I said, on the US 1 piece of it lays the foundation for the rest. The one thing I will say in favor of NILSA versus going out to bid, and I'm not saying I'm against going out to bid, but NILSA's worked for the village for a long time. She knows the village. She knows this community. She has a leg up from an experience standpoint that anybody else coming in would not, and they would have to go hit the ground and learn from scratch. I'm not saying we shouldn't bid it, find out what somebody else might charge, but I think in terms of the evaluation process, we got to keep in mind there's a reason she's here, and there's a reason that we've continued to employ her all these years, and she does have that experience factor. I think that's very, very valuable in terms of trying to move this process through. So those are my thoughts.
Can I add just a quick comment? So you don't want to get into a process where you're bidding this, because obviously you can get a low bid, may not be the best thing for the village. So you put out like an RFQ type process, which may incorporate some of what Kyle's saying, is might give you some newer ideas if that's the way you want to go. But we don't want to bid it out. And we can make it part of the the process of selecting the firm, similar to what you do with an audit. You can put together something like that. But I just want to add that.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, so that's my recommendation, is that we do go through that process of selecting an individual to put on that selection committee for the RFQ to get multiple different ideas and let them see the different.
How much time do you have? I mean, I'm not very familiar at all with the process of getting grants. I'm very vaguely, had some previous experience with it, but not enough to be able to just any kind of intelligent conversation about the process and the time that you would have. So is it something that you've got to kind of be in a 3-point stance and ready to go? I mean, the things that they're going to be asking of you to in your application for the grant money? I mean, because we're talking about spending money again that we really don't have. And so I'm in favor of doing this. I think it's something that's very much needed to intelligently move forward with the redevelopment and stuff of the village, not necessarily redevelopment, but moving forward with this plan. again, we don't have the money. I mean, you know, so I mean, I'm all for doing it, but we've got to figure out how we're going to pay for all these things that we want to do. And I agree with you. The government is renowned for dragging their feet. I mean, we could talk all night and tomorrow too, forever about the things that they just can't make a decision on. And so I'm for moving forward with this, but we got to figure out how we're going to pay for it.
Well, I think.
Can I ask Nielsen a question really
Sure,
quick? Because
go
it's
ahead.
literally just the question.
Yeah.
Based on process. So when we kind of tinker on the idea of whether we should discuss the other areas with US 1 or keep them all separate, if we kept them separate, doing a second charrette, it would just be the cost all over again, like start over, right? Okay. I'm just making sure I understand that correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I agree with, it would be great to be able to do it all at one time.
Yeah.
But, and I think the direction we're going with that was to try to save cost maybe.
Well, I was thinking, again, whatever you do for US 1 could be a foundational base, then
I
you
get
expand
I'm
upon
looking at
that.
the map and it's not much, there's
Yeah.
so many small pieces, it's not
I
much more
think,
after US
I
1.
think the way that this scope could be amended, I would say, or it's a flexible process. So we can definitely, because the areas that we are talking about, they are not large areas. You know, they are very minor areas. It's not like we are looking at minor areas and we are trying to put US 1 on top. No, it's the other way around. So if we, for example, I can look at it, some of the scope of work and see how can we include Cypress, which is a very small area. And what was the other area?
Cypress, Old
Like
Dixie,
Old
West
Dixie.
Drive. Yeah.
Beach
Old
Road.
Bridge
Dixie.
Road is another one, yeah.
Okay, we can include, I can look at it, Beach Road and Cypress, and see if we can even, with the same budget, include those areas, because they are not large areas at all. It will be, I would not recommend to do one and then the other. I think this is the
Okay.
opportunity that we should do it at once, and I think I welcome your idea to look for other RFPs, because most of all my colleagues, it will be pretty sure above 100,000. That's what is usually the market, you know. So it's very common to have above 100,000 for this type of process.
I just wanted to add something to what you said, Bruce. I think there's two elements to this. One is, which we've all talked about, is to develop kind of an overarching design concept, right, for the commercial areas of the village. To do some of the things that have been talked about, obviously, if we want to do significant landscaping, medians, if we're going to address sidewalks and some of those other things, you're right, there's a significant cost involved there, and we need to find ways to fund it, and you know, I keep looking at the grants as opportunities, but even if we can't fund all those things, one of the things we've said is we wanted to have a concept that we could put forth so that when developers come in, we can give them guidance and say, hey, this is what we're looking for, this is what we expect. If we need to make any code changes or anything else, we can accomplish that. So some of that infrastructure or capital work, maybe we can't get it all done right away. Maybe it's going to have to wait. But at least we can create that concept, create that guidance, and when developers come in, we can say, hey, we've got a plan, we've got a thought process as to how we want to move forward, and this is what we're looking for you to do.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. You know, we certainly have to have a plan. I mean, I'm not talking about trying to go in and do it all, obviously, now. I mean, that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money to be able to do all that. But we certainly need to have a plan to, yes, we got to have that to get started.
I have reached out also to Valerie Nielsen. She is the executive director or assistant executive director to the TPA, Transportation Planning Agency of Palm Beach County. And Doug and I have been talking for a long time about they do have money for sidewalks, but the problem is this: the starting point is always community participation. Every time that I speak with Valerie, I know her, she said it's critical that the starting point for asking that grant money is community participation. Have you had a process about, so this can set also the foundation for that type of grant money, where it's based on community participation.
So I have a quick question on timeline. So it looks like on your proposal, the completion time for the entire process is 4 to 6 months. That's what you have on here. So I think 2 of those months is probably the advertising you were talking about, and then you have the 4 days for charrette, and then I guess the rest of the time is your team putting
Working
together the concepts. So if you are redoing your proposal to maybe include the other areas and, like Bruce said, like an alternate for added days for charrette, hourly rates, maybe break out a little bit better schedule for each phase so we understand
Okay.
that a little better. And then maybe so we all understand this time frame versus, you know, new development and wanting to, you know, be ahead of it and get this, you know, in motion as soon as possible. I probably should know this. I don't know how, like a major redevelopment, how long that takes to get through site plan approval here. I know other jurisdictions, it can take up to a year for a site plan approval to be approved. I'm sure that's not the case here. So what is the average time frame? Say a plaza was gonna get like totally demolished and rebuilt. How long would that take?
Well,
to
right
get
now
through
we
the
have a
village?
project, the office building, which you saw so they are planning, we already have a timeline for that project. They submitted in April, I think, April, March. So, and they would like to have approval by September. So what is it, how many months? You know, 6 months? It's,
Well,
6
That's just
months?
for
3.5
site plan
now.
approval, does that include permitting too?
Site plan approval. From the beginning of the site plan approval, the DRC review committee meeting, we provided to them already the comments from the DRC. They are resubmitting now, then they will go to planning and zoning and, you know, the process. So the whole process, 6 months.
For site plan, then how long for permitting?
For
building
building constructions,
For permitting, building permit?
yes,
Add that.
I couldn't answer that
you're looking
because
at-
sometimes
Not that.
depends, they take their time.
But once you have the approvals,
It's done.
it's done.
Right, yeah.
Well, here's what I'd like to say. If we want to follow the process that Jeremy suggested, and I guess, can we do this by consensus, Keith, or do we need to put this on the agenda?
I don't think you'd want an action item.
On the agenda, okay. I might suggest that we follow the process Jeremy suggested. We want to see other cost elements or other ideas we can, with the idea that we would make a decision in July. That would then give us July and August, and we're also working on the budget at that time. So we could factor in the costs, and we could use that opportunity to publicize and promote. And then when we get into the new budget year, we're able to actually start the process, and then we can move it along, hopefully at the pace that we've all been talking about. So we have something as we get into the early part of next year.
Do you have any comments?
You were
Okay.
saying do an action item to authorize an RFQ? Is that what you meant? Okay.
So, Marianne, who do you have?
We have Mr. Bradford.
Okay, Mr. Bradford?
Good evening, Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail. Perhaps you recall that I have been at least on 2 meetings of you folks that I'm very much in favor of this. When I spoke previously to you of a visioning process, I was thinking specifically of a charrette. And most of my thoughts are exactly along the lines of Mayor D'Ambra. I am very worried about the forces of redevelopment into Cuesta, that they can move faster than government, and I'd like to be ahead of the curve. And I've reviewed Nielsen's proposal. I've written to her a couple of comments and suggestions. Most of what I had in my mind can be dealt with in the planning process pre-charrette. To answer Molly's question, in 1989, when I was involved with the DeQuesta Village Center Master Plan charrette, and that's, was the pre-internet days, and we had ours at the Lighthouse Gallery. because they had a bigger facility than we did. And I would say, you know, there's 2 or 3 big meetings in the whole process. And so the public tends to get an agenda and know when it's most important to show up. And we had between 50 and 75 people at every one of those big presentation portions. And then when the work is going on tables and so forth with architects and planners, the public is coming and going throughout the day. You know, they have their usual life they have to live. But for the big events, 50 to 75, and that was 1989 when we probably had less than 4,000 residents. The other thing I want you to consider, I would love to be able to do more, and I hope you can. And I'm so pleased that this could kick off a process. But, you know, if you can't find $72,000 in your $20-something million budget, give me a call. I'll find it for you. That's not a big deal. And the other thing is, what was it? I want you to consider the being fair to Nielsa. Now, she's put her whole concept out online there, and it's public record, and she's got some dollars in there, and so anybody that comes along through, you know, RFQ or RFP, they're going to have the benefit of that, and they're going to set that as, you know, their target to be below that number if they can. So, you know, I think in that sense this has kind of gotten cart before the horse, but, you know, if you were her, you wouldn't like being in this boat now if you're going to go down the RFQ or RFP round. So fairness, you know, is it fair to all concerned, et cetera. So anyway, those are my comments. I hope you find a way to do it. $72,000, it's nothing.
I think we can find it. I don't think that'll be a problem. Thank you, Tom. Marianne, you had somebody else, or?
Yes, we have Mark Sapiri.
Okay, Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark Sapiri. I live in the Country Club. So in view of the cost and the complexity of this project, the council should, in fairness to the village, seek multiple proposals in order to get a sense of the different perspectives. You know, one idea I've heard from very knowledgeable sources is the possibility of having a university professor oversee the project with the help of graduate students. Municipalities do this to save money while obtaining expert oversight and also an outside point of view. If the village were to go down any charrette path, it is critical to make sure the discussion is framed correctly. Right? The whole reason that we're having this discussion is to strengthen Tequesta as a small coastal village where daily life transpires at a healthy human scale and not at the wholesale massive scale of modern city. There's a broad consensus among residents in the village that the village should not become like Miami or Fort Lauderdale or even Palm Beach Gardens. And replacing the best potential of a small coastal village with more broad sheets of concrete and glass should not even be an option. The right framework for this discussion is to start with the fact that Tequesta is a small coastal village, and in this context it is not appropriate to consider stylistic or planning elements that would morph Tequesta into Palm Beach Gardens. All design references should be to towns of about 6,000 residents with priorities similar to Tequesta. Design options should be presented as directed to the goal of a beautiful small coastal village. What we would like to see from a review process is the strengthening of the best virtues of this village. The planning and design should spotlight and prioritize harmoniously the beautiful water and land and thereby reflect the understanding that the health of the land is essential to the health of this community. Design references from Miami or Vienna or Palm Beach Gardens are not apposite to the question of strengthening Tequesta as a small coastal town. They would distract the discussion. So the importance is the framing of the question. As for US 1 in particular, for example, we're already framing the discussion badly for local business when we refer to US 1 as a corridor. A corridor is a space of transience, not a destination. In the corridor perspective, Tequesta is merely a drive-through community. This does not serve the long-term health interests of Tequesta as a coherent community. It serves commuter interests. Those interests are not equivalent. We should envision this space as a beautiful destination that attracts people with beautiful and safe streets and plazas for walks with restaurants, coffee, and other shops for browsing near little parks where people can meet. In conceiving this space as a desirable destination, not as a corridor, we will inject value into the village for the local businesses and also for residents. Please prioritize the long-term health interests of the village by ensuring that whatever process is pursued has as a goal the preservation of Tequesta as a small town harmonized with its natural environment.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Mary Ann, anybody else?
Yes, we have Marcia Nielsen.
Hey, Marcia. How are you this evening?
Marcia Nielsen, 94 Beechwood Trail. The only thing I'm a little afraid of is you mention US 1, you're going to have to deal with the road the way it is, and the people are still angry. So if you mention US 1, the first person's going to say to you, oh, let's go back to 3 lanes. So just be aware that it's underneath the current, but it's ugly and it's going to be there, and you're going to raise all kinds of ire unless you know how to handle it.
Okay, thank you.
I would 100% agree with that.
Mhm.
Well, I think the idea with US 1 was to try and, to Mark's point, make it more of a boulevard and to have, as has been said before, have Tequesta define the road, not have the road define Tequesta. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, so how do we want to proceed forward? Do you want to have this as an action item at the council meeting? The question is, do we want to pursue an RFQ, or do we?
I feel like Tom brought up a very good point that I did not think of. How does that work if there's already a bid that's public?
Well, it is public and that information is out there. And again, you know, as I indicated, Nilsa's got a tremendous amount of experience with the village, and that gives her, you know, in my mind, that there's a significant benefit to that. But much like when we select auditors, you know, we have a group together. It isn't just based on price, it's based on qualifications and the capabilities of whoever comes forth with a presentation. So it wouldn't be a price-driven only. It wouldn't be a price-only driven decision. But it would be a recommendation that would have to come back to the council, and we would then
Take everything into consideration.
take it into consideration.
Okay.
But if we want to go that route, then I would say that's an action item we should have on the next council agenda, which if we decide in the interim we want to change any element of it, we can always modify it and through motion at that point in time.
I think with the, in my mind, the importance of the whole process, I would like to see it,
Okay.
more people involved.
All right, well, let's put it on as an action item, Jeremy, on that basis, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll make a determination. Keith, have you got any recommendations in this regard, or are we good?
I mean, that's the issue, is which direction the council wants to take, but that needs to be by motion and vote.
At the next,
Just go in-house. I'm going to call it Nelson's firm in-house because she does have a contract with the village for planning services, so.
I was gonna make a suggestion real quick, that maybe we don't do US 1, but maybe we do Cypress, Old Dixie, Tequesta Drive, and let US 1 be US 1, and that way it won't interact with her proposal that she already has out there. But we focus in on that, where I think we have a majority of the residents interacting, walking, and traveling in that area on, you know, on Tequesta Drive.
I wouldn't want to keep US 1 in the loop. I mean, we've talked about the importance of the US 1 corridor, everybody has. And corridor, Mark, I'm not using it like it's a pass-through, I'm just saying, just the term refers to that strip.
Well, hang on, are you asking if we have someone else give us a presentation for the other areas?
No, I'm suggesting
So it's not
that
competing
we
against
leave
what she's
US 1 alone for now,
Okay.
but that we just focus on Tequesta Drive, Cypress, and Old Dixie, and let those areas be the corridor that we work for through the charrette, and let's see how that process goes. And I think if we can have a successful project in that regard, in creating up a great design concept, and I think a lot of support from within the community, that then the next step, then we do it for US 1.
Kyle, the only issue that I have with that, buddy, is that I think a lot of the redevelopment is gonna be on US
Yeah, I
one.
agree.
You know, that's where all the brick and mortar at, that's gonna get it, you know, the people are gonna wanna go down there and tear it down and redo it and stuff. So honestly, I think that's, I'm quite the contrary with that philosophy, is that I think that it definitely needs to be included on it, simply because of that fact, because that's where most of the redevelopment opportunities are gonna be coming. You know, developers are gonna wanna go out there and buy up some of these old, you know, antiquated plazas and tear them down and do some new stuff with them. And I think that we need to, you know, really consider having that included in there if we're going to do this thing.
I don't disagree with that at all. The only reason I'm making that suggestion were twofold. One, I think there is, like what Melissa said about US One, and that pent-up frustration with a lot of people, and just being fair to Nielsen too. So that was the only reason. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea to discuss. But
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Bruce. I think US One's too critical. I think it's been suggested we could bring in the other areas as part of it. I hear what people are saying about US One. I'm going to disagree. For every one person I talk to that isn't happy with US One, I find 9 or 10 that are. The whole idea behind that, again, was to create a boulevard, to slow down traffic, to make it more pedestrian friendly. Well, I'm not going to say I speak for everyone in the village, but I don't think you do either. I don't think any one of us speaks for every resident of this village. But again, people I'm speaking to, for the most part, are happy with the change. So I think that's water under the bridge. I think what we're talking about is trying to take that US One stretch, develop it properly, and you know, create something that's beautiful, that people want. To Mark's point, that people want to come to, and they want to use the businesses and you know, provide services and to the people of this village and anyone else who wants to visit that they desire and that they're going to find beneficial. So
I think we should keep US One part of the plan, mostly, and my personal opinion, what I've seen, and I think maybe doesn't make sense to some people. You know, US One, it's a complete street program, but it doesn't look complete. So I think this process could make it look complete and complete the vision, and maybe the community would understand more what happened there, because it doesn't look complete. So
No.
I think that might be part of the frustration
no,
too.
you're right. And when the state came in and redid that road, there was an effort to try and, we were talking about the sidewalks, to try and do the sidewalks up and down. There was an effort to put street lighting all the way up and down. Unfortunately, they would not pay for all that. So we got as much out of them, working with Treasure Coast Planning and Nelson and the village staff, as we could at that point in time. But you're right, it's not complete. It's a partially done project at this point in time.
I think that, you know, we can't speak for future village council people moving forward, but, you know, it's great to have a plan in place, but if you don't put the plan in action, it's just money thrown out the window. And, you know, and I've seen it in a previous city that I lived in. We spent $82,000 doing one of these plans like this before, and nothing ever came of it. So it was like 82 grand that we threw out the window, and, you know, we didn't act on it. You know, and so I mean, we've got to be as committed to doing something with it once it's done, and, you know, and how to fund that commitment. And, you know, I hate to be the old guy that keeps singing the same old song, and, you know, he brought up a valid point. You know, $72,000 is not a very significant amount of money on a $20 million budget, but, you know, you're talking about spending $3.5, $4 million on some ground up there in Bellicon Park. It all adds up at the end of the day. And so, you know, 72 here, you know, $3.5 million here, another little bit here, before you know it, you're spending money you don't have again. So I'm all for doing this, but I'm all for making sure that we've got the money to do it with. I can venture to say that this is not only going to cost $72,000, I bet it will be double that by the time you're all done. And I'm fine with that too. I think that's a reasonable amount of money to give us the vision and the ability to move forward with a really good, well thought out, engaged plan from the citizens and amongst of other professional people that spend their lives doing this type of thing. So I'm all for doing it. I'm all for doing it with the money that, you know, we've got to get it appropriated somewhere. Right. Grant money or however we've got to do it, but we've got to be able to pay for what we do, guys.
And I think your point, Bruce, is well made, which is, right now, the way it stands is if somebody comes in with a building, okay, you got 5 different people here who could have 5 different opinions, right? Mm-hmm. But if we go out and do this properly, we will have a plan that not only reflects hopefully the consensus of this council, but the consensus of the entire community. So when you talk about future councils, this wasn't something that was just done ad hoc. It was done with significant community input, significant community buy-in, and then that should be then the guidepost for future councils as well. So even if we can't do everything right away, even if we can't do all the sidewalks or all the other things, at least from an aesthetic standpoint in terms of how development proceeds, the look, the ambiance, all the rest, there's something there to guide people going forward.
300%.
Okay, so I think we're back to an action item. It sounds like we're saying, let's include the RFQ, and then we can debate that a little further at the next council meeting, and we'll take a vote at that point in time. Okay, moving on to number 2, which is the review of the application for the Highway Beautification Grant. Mr. Chambers. Nilsa, thank you. Thank you for all the work you did on this.
Oop, careful.
I want to get out of here.
Excuse me.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The village manager tasked senior management with going out and trying to find grants for different projects that we talk about. One of them you just referred to, Nielsen just made a presentation about the US 1 corridor. So we have an opportunity at this point to apply for a beautification grant with the FDOT. In 1996, the village entered into a maintenance agreement with the DOT to maintain the medians on US 1 between Beach Road and County Line Road. We also maintain some of the right-of-ways outside of those medians at Beach Road, Tequesta Drive, where we have our Tequesta monument walls, and also County Line Road. We also maintain, to a minimal standard, the right-of-way on the east side of US 1 from Beach Road to TD Bank. Right now it's just grass, but at that time when the village entered into that agreement, they also received a $67,000 grant. They came forward with some architectural plans, some landscaping plans, and those are most of the plantings that you see on US 1 at this time. That's almost 25 years ago. So we have a small window of opportunity to apply for a grant. We have to notify the DOT by August 1st of our intent if we're going to apply for the grant. The grant deadline for your submission is October 1st. So we really have to get ahead of the game if we want to chase some funding. And we have to present at that time on October 1st our plan, our architecturals, landscaping plans. We'd have to get our grant writer on board. It'll take about 20 to 30 days to put together some plans on the US 1 medians, which would also include that area between Beach Road and TD Bank. It's also worth noting that although the roadway is in Tequesta, it's not the village's road. We don't maintain it. We also do not maintain, we do not own the right-of-way. So when we talk about sidewalks, we don't own the sidewalks and we do not maintain the sidewalks. We do not repair the sidewalks. Anything that we would do out on US 1, even if we wanted to go there and improve some of the medians, some of the landscaping in the medians, we have to submit plans and we have to get FDOT approval. So at this point, there is a matching grant available, $100,000 maximum. Like I said, we would have to initiate that now. I have funding in the Public Works budget right now for landscaping plans and the grant writer. We have to submit those before we find out if we're approved for the grant. Those fees are not reimbursable. The grant writing and the plans are not reimbursable. But obviously the funding, if we're approved, that is reimbursable. So again, it's a short window of opportunity. The legislature just approved the funding and it just came to our notice. So again, in following the village manager's task list, there is some funding out there. If we want to improve the gateway on the medians on US 1, we have an opportunity to do that now.
So if I just add this, I know Mr. D'Ambra brought this up in a council meeting or in a workshop when he first came on. So while it seems like there's some overlapping, there is. It's because we started looking at this grant many months ago prior to even this corridor talk. So that's why we have a little bit of this overlap conversation going on.
Yeah, I think my comments at the time was that particularly the area along the Bureau of Land Management land is the southern gateway into the village, and it looks pretty atrocious. It's not the way we want people coming in and getting their first view at Tequesta when they're driving up north on US 1. So that was really the reason that I brought this forth.
But we don't own this.
We
We
don't
do
own it,
not.
but that is included
But we
in the
maintain it.
maintenance agreement, so.
But we maintain Linear Park and other areas that
What is
look
it?
atrocious. Linear Park, we maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So who chose this area over other areas in the village?
Linear Park is a different agreement with the FEC.
Even other areas
Yeah.
as well within the village that we've constantly been talking about. Who chose this specific area?
That's the grant available through the DOT.
Okay.
on US 1.
State road.
Just making sure.
Yeah, and this grant's specific to that roadway.
So in order to get 100, we have to put up 100?
You have to put up 50.
50, so it's okay,
Right.
it's half of that,
Right.
okay, I got you.
Right.
Okay.
And we have estimates right now. We've gone up and down with Steve Parker and our landscaper. We're on the high side about budgetary number of $80,000. That's based on a variety of different native Florida plants. And that's on the high side of $25 per plant, and estimating about 2,000 plants, variety sizes of plants and bushes and shrubs.
Mhm.
So we're on the high side, but that's just a budgetary number.
Mhm.
Once this is, if we move forward with this, and again, the grant writer's $3,000, the landscape architect is $2,800 to produce the plans. Once I get with Steve Parker, we go out there, we figure out exactly what we need, I expect that number might come down a little bit from 80,000. We went on the high side.
And that amount's already been budgeted for this year. This current
Yes,
budget
the funds
year.
are
Currently
the
available.
funds for the grant writer and the architect are in Public Works budget.
So if we were to succeed with the grant, and let's say 80,000 was the total project cost,
That would be next year.
that would be in next year's budget, we would need
Right.
to come up with that $40,000.
And I still need to come up with a.
Yeah. So
No, I know.
I love the idea that we're looking for the grant money, and I think that is extremely important. I think we should continue down that process of always doing that. But I think it's putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit with regards to the vision. And I think that we still need to get the vision done so that we're prepared for these grants, so that we can take advantage and know exactly what we're doing and not kind of wasting that money and then redoing it again. So I would much rather see us put that $40,000, $50,000 into this rep process, get that done, and then wait till the next grant that comes back around and really have that vision so that we can just implement that vision when those grants are available, knowing that we don't have money in the budget for next year for $40,000. So,
And the grant does change from time to
Yep.
time. The last time the grant was available was a 50% match.
Yep.
And they included engineering costs. So it does change from time to time.
I just want to clarify, we're just talking about from Beach Road to TD Bank area, correct?
And all the medians in
And
the
all
middle of the road.
the
There's 7 medians, and that
Okay.
also includes the welcome, the Tequesta Monument welcome walls at County Line,
Right.
Tequesta Drive, we have
Okay.
2, and Beach Road.
And, Kyle, it's interesting, I made a note to myself while Nilsa was talking as to whether we should hold off on this. But again, the process of planning, creating, going through the SHREC process, creating, again, an plan for this, and then the process of obtaining funding, I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, we could postpone it and say we should just wait and incorporate it into the larger vision and look for money later on. On the other hand, let's say that doesn't happen for 12, 18, 24 months. Is it worth pursuing and getting a leg up again on this process and improving, the look coming into the village? It's just a consideration. I think it looks, to me, the appearances are so poor that I think it's actually worth making an investment to create a much more pleasant entryway a much more attractive entryway, and then we'll supplement, if everything works the way we hope it will, we would supplement and build upon that at a later date and time. But I don't know what everybody else's thoughts on that are.
My other question, Doug, is when they start the intersection construction in that area, do they plan on putting equipment anywhere on the sides?
In the right of way?
Yes.
Not to my knowledge, no. They would probably mobilize on A1A, because that's where most of the modification work will be.
Okay.
Do you have a vision on what you want to do out there now?
I would get with Steve Parker, I mean, that's his forte, Parker and Unetti.
Does he know
They've
native
been
plants?
established since 1989. They're up and down South Florida here, and they have put together designs for Nielsa and many other municipalities. But we want, you know, Florida-friendly, water-tolerant plants, native plants. We have a mix of everything and anything out there. I mean, we've got some sugar bush that's died off. We've got, used to be trinettes all over the medians, those are all gone. Most of what was out there is gone.
And we have the option too. I mean, if they come back with a plan and we don't like it, we don't have to go forward. If they come back with a plan, we apply for the grant. Even if we receive it and we say we don't want to go forward, we can still pass.
I still would love to see a budget item of grant money or grant matching money, and we start putting money into our fund for matching grants. That way we
You got it funded.
have it funded. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about doing something that we don't even have funding for. I'm just not, I'm totally opposed to it.
Well, again, we're talking about it for next year's budget, and we haven't gotten to next year's budget. So I think, again,
It's still planning to do something that we haven't done.
It's planning to keep the option open, and then if we find that we don't have the funds available, we always can decline to go forward. As Doug said, he's already got the money in this year's budget for the grant writer and the landscape architect. If we decide not to move it forward, if we don't have the funding available, I mean, again, as we go forward, and we'll see this in the budget process, but we are going to have, and again, I know there's going to be demands on our budgets for different things, but we'll have sea glass coming online.
So again, we're doing it before it hits.
Yes, we are doing it before this, but I'm just saying that there are things that will come to pass that are going to work to our benefit. So the question is, you've got an opportunity. Is it worth spending the $5,800 that's already budgeted to put yourself in a position to take advantage of the opportunity? You can always pass on it. If we don't have the money in the budget next year, we pass. If we don't like the plans that come back, we don't think it's worth the expenditure, we pass. We're not obligated.
This money you have budgeted, does it have to be put towards this, or is it possible to put it towards something else?
It can be put towards something else.
You know, just like the
It's just available
And every year
now.
the state kind of changes the matching amount.
I'm sorry?
Every year the state can change the matching
They
amount.
can change anything, it may not be available next year or the following year.
Okay.
They vote on it, you know, on an annual basis, so.
Yeah, what's
I just thought,
available,
you
yeah,
know,
what's
Manager and I
available.
thought it was a good idea to bring it forward. We're looking at grant opportunities, there's an opportunity right now. And again, the window is a short window of opportunity, but at least wanted to bring it to you for your discussion, you know, see where you want to go with it.
I'm not quite positive where I sit on it yet, if I'm being honest.
And just, if I didn't mention, the contract we have on US 1, it's an open-ended contract. It doesn't have an end date, so although it's not ours, we will continue to maintain it unless something changes on that corridor, which I don't see in the near future.
If we had it funded, or we had the money available to do it, I'd be all in favor of doing it. Even if we move forward with the other plan, it's going to be years before anything is done differently than what's out there right now, even moving forward with this new plan that we're talking about proposing. So it would be nice, and I think that Mayor Diambra, you know, mentioned this a bit, is that, you know, we've got 2 or 3 years to look at it like it is before anything's going to be changed out there. So I'm an advocate of trying to get some beautification done sooner rather than later, so that we can beautify our entryway in you know, in our corridor coming in through the village and stuff. So, but until we have the money, I mean, I just can't move forward with guys to spending money we don't have. And I hate to keep singing the same old song, but I just can't do it. That's my take on it.
Okay. Well, again, I guess what I'm saying is we're not spending money we don't have, because if we like the plan and we apply for the grant and we are awarded the grant, we don't have to accept it.
What if we don't get the grant?
Well, that's always a possibility with any grant situation. I mean,
I know that, there's that if again, I always get weary of the if.
there is, well, for example, we were approved for funding to acquire the Lighthouse School property. And then they walked back what they had told us in terms of its availability. We did receive a grant for that property, and we ended up having to let it go. That was several $100,000. So that's what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying, Bruce. We need to know that when the time comes, we have that money available, and that would be in next year's budget. But to me, it's worth it to spend the $5,800 to develop a plan, put it forward, submit the grant, and then if we can afford it in next year's budget, that's great. If for some reason we can't, we pass, and what we've spent is the $5,800. But at least it creates the opportunity for us.
I'd like to see it in the budget, money to spend on grants, and we don't have it.
No, this is in the budget.
So we're not going to decide on this tonight anyway.
No, we're not.
So, you know, you're talking about putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, I think I would suggest we put this on the next council meeting agenda, and then we can further debate it and then vote on it at that time.
It'll give us a little more time to mull it over to look at some more facts.
Yes. May I have a comment?
Sure, absolutely.
Do we have a comment? Is there any comments on this?
Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry. Yes, Mark Sapiri.
So Mark Superior, I live in the Country Club. Just a few observations for your consideration. First, of course, the village is considering the charrette, so I suggest you defer considering the median proposal until you've decided on that. There's no point in uncoordinated effort. Second, as to the proposal itself, the specs for the native plants should be clarified. It's not adequate for a project specification merely to reference generic categories of plants. Tequesta should require that contractors plant only plants from an approved native plants list. There are a multitude of important beneficial reasons for this, including lower maintenance costs. If the village needs a list to start with, I recommend an excellent native plant list from Palm Beach Island, and it is posted as a PDF on the website, tequestanotes.org, Tequesta Notes in one word. Look for the article on restoring habitat. Third, the municipality must not allow contractors to plant invasive species. The Congressional Research Service highlights in a document entitled Invasive Species that Florida is a state with, quote, so many harmful non-natives as to cause major ecological and economic damage to a variety of locations and industries. An invasive species is not just any non-Florida plant, but rather a plant that is especially harmful to Florida habitat because it displaces plants that are necessary to support the life that the ecosystems here need. And I agree that we do have an issue with US 1 median because we currently have a common invasive species in the median on US 1 opposite CVS. I think it was planted within the last couple of years. We must take these plants out immediately, but it doesn't need to cost anything close to what we're talking about. We could replace them with the beautiful mully grasses, and these can be obtained currently for $1.50 a pot at Earhart Nursery in Lake Worth. And these are beautiful plants. They're purple in the fall, so you could fix this problem with pocket change and a minimal amount of public works time. Native plants are not just a whimsical preference. Native plants are necessary for healthy land and healthy water and healthy human communities because they are necessary to support the life on this land and water. And fourth, the village should seek out contractors and nurseries specializing in native plants for projects like these. See the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, FANN.org. They're usually small, local, family-owned businesses, exactly the kind of business the municipality should support, and they're doing great work for the region. At least require a minimum of one bid from a native nursery on any relevant project, and hopefully all contractors will become more careful to prioritize restoring habitat and not to plant invasive species right next to the natural preserve, by the way. If you have any questions, please let me know. I would be interested in learning from you, just as a matter of education, the grant writer process, the $3,000 cost for that. I wasn't sure I understood, so if someone could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
What plant is that you're talking about replacing up
So
there?
it's the Ruella simplex. It's also known as the Mexican petunia. And it is a highly invasive species in this area, and one of the problems is, like I said, is it displaces other plants that live here, and it's also really difficult to get out. When we're going to be pulling that plant for a long time. And you know, it's nothing personal against the plants. it's a pretty plant, you know, but it's not appropriate for this location, for this habitat.
I got you.
And there's so many beautiful plants that do belong here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the muley grass.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Only grass is great, but it lasts about a month. It blooms once a year, and then it just looks like a dead plant the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think,
it looks beautiful.
I mean, Doug, you've made clear that as we go forward, we're looking at native species, and
Of course.
anybody we use is going to be given that guidance in that direction, so. Okay, so let's put this on the agenda for a vote, the next council meeting. Okay, item 3, charter amendments. Mr. Allen.
So we brought this up at a previous workshop, so staff has looked at the charter, made some recommendations. You have those, if you wanted to, we can go through them, or you can just go by questions. Just for those amendments, basically council has a decision here where you can consider a recommendation from staff, and we can bring back some language and some questions for the election, or council can, determine if you guys think a committee is needed to review the charter, or, you guys can say that our charter is fine and we don't need to do either of those things. So with that, I can answer any questions you have on specific items brought up. Staff has brought these forward.
Who would like to start? Golly, you want to start?
I'll start. I think the charter is a very important thing, and I think that reviewing it is obviously something very important that we're doing every 10 years. I'd like to see it more often. I think that getting some more involvement, setting up a committee would be the proper thing to do on this type of a government document. And I think I appreciate the staff starting the process, but now I would say let's get the committee together to let them really dive into it.
To piggyback on that, my recommendation would be if we did a committee to not have any staff on that committee. I had a question about section 3.04. Just to clarify, I had some residents ask, they didn't know what that was, and I told them I'd ask for a quick explanation in layman's terms
Text amendments.
for village clerk.
I know one of the items on here was the village clerk. It doesn't have reference to it being a department head, so it would just add department head to the village clerk appointed by the village manager and shall act as a department head, because it has department heads right underneath that.
Holly?
I would agree with doing a committee. There's another municipality that I saw in the news recently that's doing it, and they did a committee. Was it Lake Worth, maybe? I don't know. Someone else is doing it right now, and they did a committee. So I think that wouldn't be a bad thing to consider. I don't know if this has ever been discussed, and I've had some residents ask, has it ever been considered to have election cycle, or have our election with the November cycle? Or I'm sure there's pros and cons, and there's probably reasons why not. I just don't know, and people have asked, so get it out there.
It's a good question, and I think Keith may have something to add to this, but it's been discussed before, and I think the feeling was that the council election, while you'd get obviously a bigger turnout, because November gets a much bigger turnout, the council election would get lost amongst everything else, the presidential election, congressional, Senate amendments, et cetera. So I know a number of municipalities have from time to time brought that idea up, but they've tended to stay with the March because it's then focused on that local community, and that's where everybody's attention is. And those local issues then are at the forefront of the discussion rather than getting lost, in the national or the state debates. But Keith, you might have some more insight on this as well.
Just to say, it was a special act of the legislature in the early 1980s that set the municipal elections in Palm Beach County on the second Tuesday in March. Obviously, you are not bound by that. If you wanted to change that, you can change it. I am aware of the concept of voter fatigue, as the mayor points out. When you have those big presidential elections and you have federal positions and then the state positions, then the county positions, and then the constitutional amendments. It is a thing. Once the people get to the bottom, into the municipal, even though you may have more warm bodies coming out to vote, sometimes there's an impact. Not an expert, I'm just saying that I'm aware of the concept. That's why it's in March. That certainly would be something if the council wanted to take the temperature of your residents and see what they want. That would be something for them to consider. What was brought before you on this agenda item were very specific, targeted issues that I think, operational issues that the staff has encountered, bringing you suggestions on, these are things we really would like to change, and here's why. I would agree if it's the council's desire to open this up and have a full-blown charter review committee of interested parties is the way to do it. I've did one last year, I did one a couple of years ago. To Councilmember Brandon's comment, the only about not having any staff on the committee, that's fine, but there should be some professional guidance, because there certainly are statutory things. There's a few things that we can't do, and I would hate for this committee to go down a path that's legally not permissible and spin their wheels with no guidance on, no, you can't do that because of this or that. So that's just a thought.
The staff could be in the room to help the committee, yes? Or
It's a very strong suggestion for someone.
Okay. Is there a recommendation how many to be on the committee, staff-wise?
In my experience, the bigger the number gets, 5 always seems to be a good number. 7 is manageable. When you start getting bigger than that, sometimes there's an opportunity for a lot of different opinions, and it becomes more difficult.
No, I meant how many
So like
staff
the
members?
staff
Would it just be, what have you seen be beneficial in your professional career? 1, 2, none?
Honestly, I think the most important thing is some legal guidance on no, you can't go there. You want to change how you recall an elected official, well, you can't. That's one of the things that's you can't do. So that's just one example that comes to mind.
And if we go to a committee, there's a time frame that we have to be able to meet in order to have this on the ballot for a referendum. So
if you're looking at March of 2022, I believe the supervisor of elections would need the ordinance with the language and the ballot question and the summary in December, which means you'd have to have second reading no later than December. First reading would be in November. Probably want to have at least a couple of workshops. Quite honestly, at this point, I think you're probably too late for the 2022 election. I don't think there's any way for a meaningful wholesale charter review, because we've got there are some charters that are more robust than others, and I would say ours is somewhat robust. So if you're already in June, I don't think there's enough time to give it a thorough and meaningful review by a committee and still make that deadline. I think you're looking at 2023.
And I think Mr. Davis brings up an important point, which is in the same way that we talk about when we make these decisions, like, for example, like the design concept or what we do with the community center. If you don't want the 5 people on the council making this decision, and we were elected and given the power to do so if we chose, you don't want to delegate this to a committee and have just those 5 people providing input. So you're going to have public workshops. You're going to have opportunities for the public to come in and comment, and they need to be educated and advised about the process as well. So the question then, so if there's a couple things you could do here. If there are a couple things here that we thought were critical that we wanted to move forward on, the council has the ability to do that. If you still wanted to have a larger review, you could do the same thing, or instead of bifurcating it, we'll just say, let's do a committee, but maybe this is not a 2022, but a 2023 initiative.
I think I agree to make it a 2023 initiative and can start the process.
Okay.
Do it right.
Everybody comfortable with that? All right.
Just gonna ask for your feedback, we don't have to do it tonight, on how you wanna select the 5 people or the number of the committee, because that'll be the next important thing. You know, and I think referencing her article, she said, I mean, council just didn't each person appoint somebody, they actually had some interviews, and anybody who applied, I think that would be a better process, but I'll solicit some feedback from you guys, and we'll come put together a process that you guys can workshop and vote on to make sure it's appropriate process that you guys all feel is right.
I'd like to see it go somewhat like we do P&Z. I don't think we each should select somebody. I think it should be
No, I agree.
all or one, not hand select.
I think we should ask for people to volunteer and then make a determination.
And there's no legal requirement that the members on this committee have to be village residents. You could have professional members, planners, attorneys, whatever, who are not village residents. They don't have to be. Obviously, you want village residents, but I recall the last time that there was a charter review, and it was before my firm was the village attorney. I think there were folks involved in that process who were not village residents.
Yeah, and that one I would say, I'd only want village residents.
So,
Yeah. I think.
I just throw that out.
Yeah,
there
no, I
to
understand,
think
yeah.
about.
Okay. All right, any other comments on the charter? All right, moving along, update and discussion on the American Rescue. Oh, I'm sorry.
Some comments.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. This is one of my pets, so bear with me. Although now, my big, long thing, I don't have to say because you've agreed to a committee. However, I will bring up some of the points that I made. History should be taken into consideration. For example, the proposed change of section 2.05 vacancies and forfeitures of office, which you put forward, the staff put forward, may very well lead to a public fiasco like the one you had in 1999 with Council Cameron's vacated seat. I still remember that. So we have gone through this before. Pat and I have done archives on these before. We have files on this before. We are open. We have worked on this whole thing with archives for 5 years, and we do have a little bit of information which you might find advantageous. So please keep us in mind. If you want to, don't put us on the committee, or do put us on the committee. It's up to you. But this is really important. And if you don't know the history, you will repeat it.
Agreed. And whether you're on the committee or not, the committee would, I think, would welcome input from you and Pat on this matter. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, we have Thomas Bradford.
Mr. Bradford.
Well, I was prepared to say something, but you're heading in the right direction, so I'll keep my mouth shut. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that because we've got a meeting after this meeting, so. Yeah, we do. Okay, moving on to number 4, the update and discussion on the American Rescue Funds. Mr. Allen.
So I thought it was appropriate, I know we've had a request or two, or a question or two about the American Rescue Funds. You know, the village of Tequesta is gonna get we're supposed to get $2.58 million. We have not received those funds up to date. We're a non-entitlement community, so the funds will go to the state first and then trickle down to the village. We can use these funds basically in 4 different categories. There's a 158-page document that goes with these funds. The 4 categories. Respond to public health emergency or negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small business, nonprofits. To respond to workers performing essential work. For the provision of government service to extend the reduction of revenues due to COVID-19, and to make necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So at this time, you know, we're still looking at the possible, we'll say, plugging the holes in the budget as far as uses. We do have some thoughts on some stormwater projects that we can use the money for. But I think if there's any desire from the council or any ideas or projects that we can look at funding, using this money, I mean, I think now would be the time to maybe have some of that discussion. Keep in mind that, you know, we could have some impacts, financial impact for the coming years, and we can use this money. It just needs to be appropriated, or it's got to be earmarked by 2024. It's got to be used by 2026. So this money, it'd be good to make sure that the impacts of COVID aren't felt for years to come. We can use some of this money to offset some of that. So with that, if there's discussion or thoughts on ideas, we can look at potential budget items for it.
Now, money comes in 2 tranches, right?
That's right.
Okay. And you're thinking that there might be some greater flexibility, potentially.
The thought is right now, while we all thought it was going to be very flexible, the 158-page document does narrow it down a little bit. The thought is just the way they presented it is that they will continue to look at. The bigger cities have got these funds and have already started asking questions and started trying to, I guess, change the way that it's used. So there's a lot of belief that some of these rigid guidelines will change and become a little more flexible. There's no guarantee in that, but there's a thought of if we don't use it all, to try to stretch it out over time. We might, if we don't need it in the coming years, that there might be some more flexibility built in the coming years.
So would your thought be to preserve some of these dollars?
Well, the initial thought is we need to, we have some lost revenue that we've already pinpointed that will help us with the budget process. Our stormwater, we spent $800,000–900,000 in stormwater in the last year and a half. Our fund is very low in that. So with some stormwater projects and this being a good use for that, I think we're looking at some projects, maybe tying some roads so we can help with some of the road money. So those are a couple of processes that we've looked at, or projects we've looked at. But I would say, let's not spend all $2.58 million in the first year.
Yeah. And you're already starting to weave some of these ideas into the budget that's going to be coming forward, right? Yep. Okay. Thoughts?
Set some of that money aside for some of this grant money.
Not allowed to use.
Can you use it on expenses that you did last year?
No, it's from March, and Hugh, you jump in here anytime because he's read the document 2 or 3 times as well. And it starts from March, I want to say March 31st of 2020 or 2021 moving forward. So the idea of this money is they want you to use it moving forward and spend the money on COVID-related stuff forward, that you can't capture the past expenses. So, we'll get into a situation with a lot of municipalities where there's not a whole lot of lost revenue from municipalities in Florida, especially since we're very heavy on ad valorem taxes. Well, property values didn't go down in Florida, so you see that in some other states like New York and California, where everybody's leaving, the property values haven't went up at the same rate. So we don't have $2.58 million lost revenue, so we looking at some of these other projects that we can use it for. I know we're talking about like a business liaison to help with some of our businesses to really help get them back on their feet, and continue to go down the path where they were pre-COVID. So there are a few things we have an idea for the business community and help them with that. Some holes in the budget, and then some of the other stuff will just be projects that we can tackle through either stormwater or looking at some of those projects.
And is there any timeline it has to be spent by?
2026.
Okay.
It has to be earmarked or by 2024.
Now, are they still going to require the audit after the first year to finalize your eligibility for the second tranche?
So the whole thing, there is an audit process that is put in place that they'll look at it. From what we're told, as long as you're using the first set of money, you'll get the second set. But after that, there's even a provision if you don't use it correctly through the audit process, then you'll have to pay it back. So we're being very mindful, making sure it's going to be a transparent process and what we're using those funds is appropriate.
Can you use these funds to pay that single audit?
Pay what?
So I don't think the single audit is going to be required, and he just went to GFOA. Did they say anything about the single audit being required for these funds? Okay, hasn't been determined. No.
Okay.
We'll figure out a way.
Because
to
it's
make
over
it-
that threshold.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll just continue to stress, I think, just challenge staff to be creative, to put the money back into the community as much as we can. So whether it's, you know, the infrastructure, stormwater, there was a fact sheet that Florida League of Cities issued, and there was, you know, how you can address negative economic impacts with small businesses, the community. So I just really challenge staff to be creative and see what we can do to put some of this money back into the community.
Second that.
So probably with the budget process, you guys will probably get a little more idea of where we're at with using these funds with the budget process and even probably some tagging some projects. And so there'll still be some decision points for you guys to use those funds. We haven't received them yet, but council will be very involved in that process.
That's great. That's a lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
That's all I have.
Any other thoughts?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, that's going to conclude it for this evening.
I have two things that
Oh.
are on the agenda that I'd like to bring up if possible.
Okay, so we'll do any other matters. Go ahead.
Okay. What do we think about having Jeremy give us a monthly update on the strategic plan and where they're at? Or bi-monthly,
I'd say quarterly.
quarterly?
Yeah, I think a quarterly update would be sufficient. I don't want to staff to, they've got enough work on their plate, so I think it's important. I do agree with you that we want to get a regular report out, but I think every 30 days might be a little too frequent. I think the quarterly would be appropriate. I don't know.
I'm
what's
always
everybody
open
else
to
think?
communication, and I think in the past, Jeremy on his weekly update, if there's something kind of big that's been working on, he usually throws it
Yeah.
in there. I'd be open just if we are moving on one of our strategic plan items and it's there, I would be open to just throw it on there. Doesn't have to maybe be like every 30 days, but I do like it when you throw those big items on there.
Didn't we talk about doing a council presentation every quarter?
I thought we did, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a
I don't know
presentation
if we
quarter,
ever
but
decided on that, but if we want to order, we can. I will, just an update, I guess, we're trying to make that document ADA compliant right now, so we can put it on the website. So you can't find our websites because we're still working on the ADA portion of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
like
if
even
there's,
community center, like he'll throw in like little updates on that,
Yeah.
the weekly one. I wouldn't mind that. Anything that's like been going on, but the big presentation quarterly.
but a quarterly review, I think that makes sense.
In a workshop,
Or the council meeting?
Could be either one.
starting when?
But I will say, if it's going to be lengthy, and there's going to be a lot of discussion in the workshop, I think format is the better place to have it, particularly if we're bringing other people in.
Okay.
When's the first one?
Did you have
When do
any?
you want to do the first one?
Do you have
We can do
anything?
July.
Is that the only thing?
We
Oh,
can
no, I
try to-
have one more other item after we're
We can try
done
to do
with
the
this.
July workshop and shoot for that.
Okay.
And that way we get us kicked off with it.
All right, that sounds,
The other thing was that the cell tower that Jeremy emailed us, what's the status on that? Did anyone have any concern about that?
So we received that cell tower review. Mr. Davis and his team reviewed that, provided some comments for us. So right now, we believe we have an incomplete application. However, I mean, lack of, turning the documents, we feel like it's probably gonna meet most of the statutes that apply.
I was surprised when I saw the size of that tower. And I thought it was gonna be some big monstrosity thing, but it's a mere little aluminum pole with a little, like a little solar panel or something on it. I mean, it's not very big at all. I mean,
So I think you asked me, Molly, about maybe the nearest location. And if you go on toward Stewart, on the right-hand side, they're building a new fire station. I saw a pole that looks probably almost identical, so you'll be able to, if you notice it, because it is pretty small, it doesn't stick out. If you drive that way, you'll see it on the right-hand side. It's not a huge tower like that you would think of for a big cell tower. I think that would be a good location if you want to check it out.
how tall was that thing? Do you remember?
40 feet, 38.
it's still 38 feet tall.
38 feet?
And it's white. It's like, hello.
It's not concrete, it's aluminum.
Is that particular location essential from their vantage point in terms of their ability to effectively utilize the signal?
I'm not sure. I haven't asked that question.
I'd like to have that question asked.
I'd be curious if we can push it back
Yeah.
past the sidewalk.
My
You know,
question,
that-
I think
So
I
it
asked
can't
Jeremy was who
be, it
owns
can't
that?
go that way, it's gonna come back
Towards
towards
the
the
street.
road more, because I think there, don't get me on the numbers, but it's, needs to be 45 feet from a residential property line. So it actually needs to go, in order to make it compliant, like I said, it's incomplete at this point, it would need to come like 2 feet closer to the road in order to make it compliant, which it's in the right of way, plenty of right of way, they could do that.
Can we put a roundabout there? I think it's a great idea.
Tequesta Drive and Country Club Drive. It's right behind the marquee sign.
Or in front of it.
With no American flag or anything on it, just,
It's gonna be an eyesore, that's for sure.
It's like a
maybe they
main,
slap
I
an
guess,
American flag on it, it becomes.
We couldn't get them to put it in the drainage swale out here on the village green, could we?
I'm not sure. I think we can offer.
I'm trying to
it.
think of somewhere
All I do is
where
offer
it's
it.
minimal, yeah, minimal visible.
And that's a
Yeah.
major intersection,
Yeah.
so many people, and it's just really
Yeah.
residential. There's still, I mean, it's better than, I think, the other location where it was like
Yes.
really in the neighborhood. But it's still, the location,
Yeah.
I'm not
Well,
a
this-
fan of. I don't know if there's anything we can do.
This gets back to our-
If there's consensus to try to find a better place, I don't know.
It gets back to our whole 5G discussion.
I mean, overall, I don't want to see them at all, but
I agree.
that's where I stand.
I've talked to people and they're like, great, finally, I'll be able to use my cell phone at the house, so.
Yeah. See, I'm not one of those people, because I know what we would need to make up for that, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
So do we anticipate having more information and having some further discussion of this at the next council meeting? Because I don't know what the timeline is
I don't know.
in terms of when we have to respond and when.
I think they have 30 days when the clock starts ticking, when they get a complete application in, for us to approve or deny it. And it's supposed to be based on the state statutes. I mean, if council just wants to say no, we can turn it off.
No, I know, and then we
they can
have- and
fight
then-
us
and then they're
legally
gonna
if
see
that's
us,
what you
so-
guys want to do. I mean, you guys are the.
So are we thinking like July council meeting if they fulfill the
So there's
application?
no,
Does it
there's
come
no
to us?
requirement for council to hear it.
This
Okay.
doesn't come to the council for action.
We don't have to, we don't do
Just
anything.
Give them some information on the status of the processing, but this is not a council action.
Okay.
We've already decided on the code.
I thought we still had to review it, but okay, all right.
This was Molly's question. I mean, if all council wants us to fight it and fight the legal bills that go with it, I mean, we'll have at it.
Well, I mean, I agree with Molly. I'd prefer not to see it there, and maybe if we can try and determine if there, that's why I asked the question about the signal, whether there's an even more inconspicuous place that it could be located.
So all I can do is ask, your offer is to put it on village property in the swale?
It would be out of the way,
Okay.
and it wouldn't be disturbing anybody.
But I think it puts it within the 45 feet of the homes, right?
I'd have to look at the location.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the school over there. I don't know how that fits in, but,
I'm not sure.
it's not
I
great.
feel like there's weird language about schools and retirement homes too.
Yes.
Or retirement communities, so.
Like, I don't think there is a great place to put it, because we are such a residential
yeah,
area.
I agree. Okay, Mr. Bradford, do you want to make a
Can
comment?
you just, is it the same company that was doing the app for Bayview Terrace? Or is it a different company
I
that's
think
applying?
this is AT&T, right?
I believe it's a different company.
I don't know what the previous company was. This is an AT&T facility.
I think AT&T had also submitted earlier.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the previous one was AT&T.
Okay. And the only thing I wanted to add is I did get a chance to go to the memorial service yesterday out at Riverside Park. And it was very well attended. There were about 250, 300 people there. It was very nicely done. Shift 1 from Tequesta Fire Rescue was out there, and they were, and a number of police officers, and they represented the village well. So it was a great event, and I'd encourage everybody in the future, if you have the time and the opportunity, to attend that as well. Okay, that's it for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Are we conference room, right?
We have
Okay.
a 5-minute break.
5-minute break. 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 8:15.